to show you how to make these really simple, really easy Tunisian crochet mug cozies. For this project, you're going to need a little bit of yarn. I'm using Yarnspiration's Karen Kindness in the color Robin's Egg Blue. A regular crochet hook, rubber band, scissors, yarn needle, and a measuring tape. The first thing you're going to do is take your regular crochet hook and you're going to take a rubber band and you're going to wrap it around the very end. So you create a little stop so your stitches won't fall off. The size hook that I'm using is an 8mm, and the yarn that I'm using is a worsted weight yarn. It's a number 4 weight yarn. I recommend using a larger hook than you're used to using with your worsted or with whichever yarn you're using. And the reason for that is so that you'll have less curling in your work. As you get more used to Tunisian crochet, you'll be able to use smaller hooks. But in the beginning, use a larger hook and make your stitches a little bit more on the loose side and definitely not tight. The next thing you're going to do after that is take your coffee mug and you're going to measure around the top where the widest part is and leave a little bit of room for ease or for stretching. So mine is about 10 inches, so it's a little less than 10 inches, but I'm going to make it 10 inches long. And also measure how high you want it to be as well. So it's probably about 3.5 to 4 inches. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is make a slip knot. This is our tail, this is the working side of our yarn. You take the working side of your yarn and just flip it over, and then take the working side of your yarn and pull it up through that loop. Just put it on your hook and tighten it. That's why it's called the slip knot, because it will slip. And now you're going to chain the number of chains to the length of your coffee cup. So in my case, I'm going to chain it so that it's about 10 inches long. So to make a chain, you have your first loop on the hook, and then you're going to yarn over the hook and pull through that loop. You're going to repeat that. You're going to yarn over your hook and pull it through. We've made 2 chains. So now just continue in this manner, chaining loosely, because this is Tunisian crochet, so we want to have our stitches be more on the loose side so that we don't have so much curling. So chain until you have about the length of your coffee cup, the diameter. But do a few extra, do about an inch more, because Tunisian inch, or even 1.5 inches more, because Tunisian crochet tends to tighten up a little bit as you go along. So I'll meet you back here when you have that done. Okay, so my chain is a little bit longer than 10 inches. It's almost 11 inches. And so now I'm ready to start my foundation row. And what we do is we take a look at the chains, on the front side, they have these V's. You have a top bar and a bottom bar. And then in the back, we have a back bar or a back bump. And when you're doing Tunisian crochet, we're going to want these V's to be part of our bottom edge. So we work our first stitches into the back bumps of our chains. This loop on our hook is actually our first Tunisian stitch. So we're going to skip the first chain and we're going to work into the back bump of the second chain. You put your hook in there into the back bump. You're going to yarn over your hook, grab that yarn, and pull up a loop. And as you go along, you're going to want to try and make sure that all your loops are about the same height. That you don't want to be pulling it really tight, especially this foundation row. It may feel weird at first if you're used to crocheting tight. Just trust that it's going to work out best. So, go into the next back bump, yarn over, grab the yarn with your hook, pull it through, and get it to the same height as all the other loops. Yarn over and pull up a loop. You're going to continue this all the way to the very end, and I'll meet you there. Just going to show you my progress. I'm about halfway through, and as you're going along, as the loops start to build up, you might be unsure of, they might be bunching up. What do I do? You can pull them down a little bit, and it also may feel a little weird if you're not used to touching yarn. You're used to touching just your hook. So don't worry about the yarn being underneath your fingers, your work being underneath your fingers as you're doing this. Remember to pull up those loops to the same height. It can be really easy as you're going along for them to get a little tight as you go along. So keep making sure that you are pulling them up as you go along so that your work is not tight. Okay, we're almost at the end. Okay, so we're at the last chain, that last back bump. Yarn over and pull up that last loop. So your hook will probably look something like this. You can see that you can actually fit a lot of loops on a regular crochet hook, as long as you have something to keep them from falling off. And this, what we just completed here, is the forward pass of our foundation row. In Tunisian crochet, every row consists of two passes. The forward pass, where we add loops onto our hook, and then the reverse pass as we close off each of those loops. And we'll see that next. Because of this, we never turn the work, except in special cases where you're doing some fancier things with Tunisian crochet. But for right now, you're always going to have the work facing you. And as you can see here on the bottom, we're going to have a really nice bottom edge from working into those back bumps. So let's start the reverse pass. So to begin the reverse pass, you're going to yarn over and pull through one loop. That makes your edge stitch. Then the rest of the way we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. This one that you just created and one of the loops on your hook. So we yarn over and we pull through 2 loops. And then we yarn over and we pull through 2 loops. Now, as you can see, this is really the easy part. The reverse pass is the fastest part. I want to tell you to keep in mind not to make these stitches too tight either, because what will happen is your fabric, I'll show you with this one here. If your reverse pass is too tight, what will happen is your fabric won't have any stretch in this direction. And you want it to be able to have at least a little bit of stretch. Tunisian crochet generally has more stretch in the up and down direction than in this direction, precisely because of this return pass, this chain that we're going to be creating. So let's just do a couple more of those. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and you just work in this way all the way back, and you just slide up your stitches as they become a little tighter. Yarn over, pull through 2. Don't worry about speed in the beginning. You will get much faster as you get used to working this style of crochet. And the reason why I'm just showing you this whole reverse pass is so that you can see what it looks like as I feed those loops up. And also, you'll also notice that your last few stitches, they tend to seem a little bit looser. That's okay, don't worry about that. All right, so we just finished our foundation row. And now we're going to work a row. This would be Tunisian simple stitch, but it's often referred to as the foundation row. So the next thing we're going to do is work our next row, and we're going to work Tunisian simple stitch. So, just like before, this first loop that's on our hook is considered our first stitch, and it corresponds with this first vertical bar. If you look at our stitches here, we have a front vertical bar and we have a vertical bar that is in the back of the work. Then we have this horizontal chain that we created with our return pass. And just like our starting chain, it has an upper bar, a lower bar, and these back bars or back bumps. Those are things that we'll use later on in more advanced Tunisian stitches, but for now I'm just showing them to you for future reference. So, but for the Tunisian simple stitch, we're going to use the front vertical bar. And since we already have our first stitch on our hook, to make our second stitch, we're going to go into the second vertical bar. You just go right underneath, yarn over, grab the yarn, and pull up a loop. It's actually really, really easy. Make sure that that loop is the same height as your first loop. Keep them nice and loose and you won't have so much curling. Go under the next bar, yarn over, grab the yarn, and pull up a loop. I like to always make sure that I kind of give it a little extra pull up to make sure that it's the same height. And to do that, it helps to have your tension in the hand that's holding your working yarn be loose so that yarn can pull up nice and easily. And we're just going to work this way all the way down. And I'm just going to show you this whole pass so that you see how I handle all the loops as they come onto my hook here. Kind of every so often I just kind of pull them down a little bit, because what that does is it keeps my stitches, it keeps the loops that I'm adding from getting too tight. If these loops start bunching up too much, you end up tightening up a little bit on your loops, and you don't want that. You'd rather have them be a little bit on the looser side. As you get more experience in Tunisian, if you want to have, tighter fabric, you will, when you get the feel for it more, you'll be able to tighten up slightly. But for now, keep your stitches nice and loose. We're almost here at the end. All right, now we're at the end stitch. And this is the trickiest part of Tunisian crochet, but it's really not that hard if you know what you're looking for. So this edge stitch has 3 parts. It has 2 threads on the edge, one that's in the back, one that comes over the front. And then you also have this 3rd thread. It's almost like this is like the front vertical bar and this is like the back vertical bar. And this is almost like it's a back bump essentially. So what you're going to do for that last stitch is you're going to go on top of the inside thread, this one right here, and under the 2 outer threads. Yarn over and pull up that last loop. And this is what it looks like on the hook. So we're going to do our reverse pass now. Again, same as before. It's always the same. You yarn over and pull through 1, creating that edge stitch, and we're going to have a really nice edge. One of the nice things about Tunisian crochet is it automatically creates this really nice edge on all 4 sides of your work. Then the second thing we do is yarn over, pull through 2, remembering to keep our stitches on the looser side. Not like super, like way loosey-goosey, but definitely not tight. In fact, you're better off having them be even a little loosey-goosey in the beginning. Because you'll have less frustration with curling. There, I just dropped that. Sometimes on your reverse pass, you might accidentally pull through pull through 3 loops by accident. And if that happens, just back up and begin again. Basically, you should have 1 chain in between all of your vertical loops. Just feed these up a little bit as you go. Oop, I need to get more yarn. Finish this, yarn over, pull through 2, 2, okay, so now we've just completed the second row, and you can see the woven look starting to appear. So go ahead and do 1 more row of Tunisian simple stitch across. And then I'm going to come back here and show you an additional stitch called the Tunisian knit stitch. You can either continue to make your cozy in just simple stitch, just Tunisian simple stitch. So in other words, just do every row just like that until we get to the bind off at the end, and you can fast forward to that. Or if you want to make this fancier version, so this is the simple version, it's just made with Tunisian simple stitch. And if you'd like to make the fancier version that incorporates knit stitch into the cozy, then that's what we'll do next. But before we do that, go ahead and just do 1 more row of Tunisian simple stitch. Okay, so just finished the 3rd row of Tunisian simple stitch. So this is our 3rd row here. And now we're ready to begin the fancy version. Like I said before, if you want to keep going in just simple stitch, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. And I just want to point out that you can see how it's curling. Even though we're doing our stitches nice and loose, don't worry about that. That's something that you can block out afterwards. And also, when you're making larger items, this curling will work itself out with the weight of the garment. And this is going to work itself out when we sew it together into a tube. So, for the next row, what we're going to do is we're going to have 4 stitches of Tunisian simple stitch on each end. And in the middle, it's going to be all Tunisian knit stitch. And I'll show you that when we get to that. So this is our first, this is number 1. So we're going to do 3 Tunisian simple stitches. 1, 2, and 3. So we have a total of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 Tunisian simple stitches. This one counts as the first one. All right, so now to do a knit stitch, if you recall, we learned in the beginning that we have the front vertical bar and we have the back vertical bar. For the simple stitch, we've just been going under the front vertical bar, working in the front of the work. For the knit stitch, we're going to go in between both of those to the back of the work. Then we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. Okay, so let's do the next one. You can see the front vertical bar and the back vertical bar. We're going to go in between both of those. There's that back vertical bar. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Now it's really especially important with the knit stitch that you pull up those loops nice and high. And the reason is this edge of this reverse pass, this chain that was created by the last reverse pass, will tend to curl your work even more forward. So as long as those are nice and high, and like I said, this is kind of a, this is a learning piece, so don't be afraid that it's going to be too loose. It's better off if it's a little too loose. As you're learning how to work with Tunisian crochet, because there's a tendency to especially with knit stitches, they're easy for them to it's easy for them to be really tight, and then you're really going to have a lot of curling. But as I said, don't worry so much about that. It works itself out in the end. So we're going to go all the way down. Sometimes what I do is I'll hold this stitch here so that it doesn't get pulled down, so it doesn't get pulled tighter as I'm making the next stitch. That helps me to keep my stitches from getting too tight. You can do that in the beginning when you're just kind of getting the feel for the tension with Tunisian crochet. And also, as I mentioned before, it's helpful if you get those loops down a little bit. And keep the tension in your hand that's holding the working yarn. Keep that nice and loose. Oops. Okay, let's see, how many do we have left? So remember the end stitch is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have just one more knit stitch to do. Okay. And the last 4 we're going to do simple stitch. 1, 2, 3, and let's review that end stitch again. We have our 2 outer threads. We have our inner thread. We're going to go on top of the inner thread and under the 2 outer threads. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Then we're going to do our reverse pass. It's the same as before. It doesn't matter if it's simple stitch or knit stitch. We yarn over, sorry, let me go back and do that again. So for the reverse pass, yarn over, pull through 1. That creates our edge stitch. Yarn over, pull through 2. That creates our first chain in the horizontal chain of the reverse pass. Remember to keep these loose as well, and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, so we just finished that row, and we've got our 4 Tunisian simple stitches, and we've got this row of knit stitches. I'm sure you're seeing it on your own work, but you can see that it's starting to form the look of a knit. So what you're going to do now is just repeat that. You're going to do 4 simple stitches. Remember, this counts as 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're going to knit into every knit stitch, and then you're going to Tunisian simple stitch into the edge. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'll meet you back when you've done that and come back across. I'll meet you back here for that. All right, so now we just finished that row a second time, where we have 4 simple on each end and knit all across. Knit across in the middle. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do 4 simple, 4 knit, then all simple, 4 knit, and 4 simple. So I'll start that out with you. So this is number 1 of our simple stitches. 2, 3, and 4. Now we're going to do 4 knit stitches. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got 4 simple, 4 knit. Now we're going to do simple all the way in the middle. When we get close to the end, we'll check our counts to make sure that we don't miss where we're supposed to start. Oops. It's not easy doing this with a camera. Okay. Remember to keep these stitches nice and loose. Okay, let's count what we have here. These are our 1, 2, 3, 4 simple, 1, 2, 3, 4 knit. So we've got 1, 2, 3 more simple to do. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to do 4 knit. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 simple. 1, 2, 3, and we're back at our edge stitch. We've got the inside thread and the 2 outside threads. We're going to go on top of the inside thread and under the 2 outer threads. Yarn over and pull up that last loop. And we're going to do our reverse pass. Yarn over, pull through 1. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2, all the way back. And I'll meet you at the end. All right, so now we just completed this row where we are back to having some simple stitches in the middle. And You can see that it is curling. Again, the reason why I'm pointing it out is just to tell you that I'm sure you may be experiencing this as well. And different yarns will curl more than others. So if you're if you're crocheting loosely, but the yarn is really stretchy, you may have more curl than, say, a cotton yarn. As long as you're crocheting loosely, you might have a little less curl. But the main thing is, don't worry about it. Honestly, trust me. All right, so just repeat that row again. You're going to do 4 simple, 4 knit, Tunisian simple stitch all in the middle, 4 knit, and 4 simple. And then come back, and I'll meet you back here at the end of that row. Okay, so we just finished row 7, and we're ready to repeat this row again, where we do 4 Tunisian simple stitch, knit stitch all the way across, and 4 Tunisian simple stitch at the end. And again, don't worry about the curling, trust me. I want to point out to you here, just in the interim, in case when you're doing Tunisian patterns, if you ever get confused what row you're on, because as you may have noticed, as you do these stitches, the next row creates what the row below it looks like. So sometimes it can be confusing which row was which. But if you ever need to know what row you're on, you can count these edge stitches to know what row you're on. So here we have row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now we're starting row 8. So go ahead and repeat these rows. You're going to do 2 of them. 4 simple stitches, then knit all the way across, and then 4 simple stitches. So 4 Tunisian simple, Tunisian knit, 4 simple. You're going to do 2 rows of that now. I'll meet you back at the end of those 2 rows. Okay, so we just finished 2 more of this same row where it was 4 simple, knit across, 4 simple, and you did 2 of those rows. Now we're going to do a row of just all simple stitch across. And for those of you who are doing only just simple stitch, we're going to be working let's see, 8, 9, 10. You'll be working 10 rows, and then when you get to your 10th row, or whatever the height is of your mug, stop and wait for the bind off row. Okay, so go ahead and do a row of all simple stitch across and meet me back here at the end of your return pass. Okay, so just finished a row of all Tunisian simple stitch. You can see it here. It's the stitch that looks woven. And before we do our bind off row, I just wanted to mention to you that if your piece looks a little lumpy, bumpy, not neat, please don't worry about that. This is your first piece, or maybe it's only your second piece of Tunisian crochet. Don't think Tunisian crochet is not for me. I can't do this. Your first piece of crochet or knitting that you ever did, I'm sure, was exactly the same in terms of, not perfect. This is just going on your coffee mug, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And if you want to really get good at it, make a few of these. Make one for your neighbor, make one for your coworker, make one for your husband or your best friend. And you'll get really good at these stitches. And then of course you can play around with combining them in your own way. So, you know, don't judge yourself harshly. All right, so let's start the bind off row. So binding off is going to create another one of these rows, and that's why. So we want to match the look of this bottom. We have 2 rows of Tunisian simple stitch here, and we're going to want to have that same look up here. So you would think, oh well, I'll do another row of Tunisian simple stitch before binding off, but actually you're going to want your last row, your bind off row, to be whatever stitch it is that you want to do, and you can bind off in any type of stitch. So, but we're going to bind off in simple stitch, and there are some other different types of bind off, like you can bind off in single crochet, but we're going to do the most basic bind off, which is bind off in slip stitch. And what we do is we start the row just like any other row, skipping the first vertical bar, and we're going to go under the second vertical bar, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we're going to slip that stitch through the loop on our hook. So do that again. So we have 1 loop on our hook. We're going to go under this front vertical bar, yarn over, pull up a loop, and slip it through the loop on our hook. And you may be wondering, well, you know, why do we have to do a bind off in Tunisian? It's because it's not completed until you do so, because you see at the end of every return pass, you're left with these holes in your work. And unless you want that to be a design feature of your work, which you certainly could do, if you want your fabric to be uniform, you're going to do a bind off. So let's do that again. We go under the front. So we're binding off in Tunisian simple stitch with a slip stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, pull it through. And we'll work this all the way to the end. I'll meet you at the end. Okay, I'm at the last 2. You can always tell you're at the end of your row. You've got 1 last vertical bar and then your edge stitch. And when you're binding off, do so more on the loose side, just like everything else in Tunisian, so that you maintain that some stretch, unless of course you're doing a project where for some reason you don't want it to have stretch, and then you could do it a little bit tighter. So that was our edge stitch. That was our last one, and we're just going to pull through the yarn and leave kind of a long tail, because we're going to use that for putting this together. And then you pull that through and just tug that tight. And then you can see our top edge matches our bottom edge. Two, 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 two. And what we're going to do now is we're going to connect it. Okay, so to finish this piece, what we're going to do is we're just going to connect it on the 2 ends with our tails, the tail end. Okay, so now we're ready to connect this and make it into a tube. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the tail ends to connect the top and the lower edges of our mug cozy. And this is where your handle will go through. So it's really easy. You're just going to take your piece and fold it in half, and you're going to line up the two corners, and you're just going to go into one corner and into the other corner, and then go through that loop, pull it, oops, sorry about that, pull it tight, and just do that like 3 or 4 times, 5 times. And then you're going to sew in the ends. So just go in these back little bumps back here. Just kind of weave it. That's probably good enough. And I saw somebody do this. This is kind of a neat trick. Kind of pull it a little bit more, cut it, and then stretch it, and it goes right underneath. So then you're just going to do that on the other side, and I'll show you how to put it on your coffee cup. Okay, so now you're ready to put your coffee cozy onto your mug. And what I've found is, sometimes I might have to heat up my tea in the microwave, and I don't know if it's such a good idea to put yarn in the microwave. So I needed a way to be able to put this on when it's filled, when it's already full. So what I do, I'm just going to show you from the side here, is I put it over the handle first, and then I grab it from the bottom and pull it up like that. And then it's all ready to go. So I may have made mine a little bit too loose, but that's okay because I have other mugs that this will fit on that are larger, like this one. There we go. I kind of think of it as like a mug sweater, for my mug. So I hope you like this. I hope that you like Tunisian and get the bug now. And if you do, and you'll probably want to do some more projects. And although you can do, lots of little projects with this kind of a setup, definitely do that. But you might want to buy yourself some tools, the right tools for making more projects, so that you don't have to hold back from doing more projects. And you could get a set of Tunisian crochet hooks that are long, or you could just get one set of the Denise sets are the best, and they are a little bit expensive. You can get a full set, and that includes 12 different sizes and several different lengths of extension cords. This is one of the Denise hooks. This is also an 8mm, and it has these extenders, and they're modular, so you can add more and more and more. And then you just add one of these stops at the end, and it's just a little tiny turn to lock and unlock it. It's a very tiny turn. So if you think you're going to be doing Tunisian crochet, I would say just get the Denise set. It'll cover you for every kind of project you could ever do, even little ones. You don't need to buy any of the, the long hooks that are solid all the way across. If you want to start off with a half set, she has half sets, and they are, I think, $25, $24 or $25, and the full set is $50. And, when I first saw that price, I was like, ugh, $50 is a lot of money. And, the truth is, like, as crocheters and knitters, we buy equipment, we buy a little bit here, we buy a little bit there. And if we looked at how much we paid for things altogether, for all the hooks and needles that we have, it probably would shock us, and it would be a lot more than $50. So it's a good investment. You won't have to buy any more after that, because the nice thing with Tunisian crochet is, unlike knitting, where your knitting needles are tied up in whatever project you have, with Tunisian crochet you can be in the middle of a project, and as long as you've completed a reverse pass, you can then go ahead and use that needle on another project. So having one Denise set is really a great investment. I totally recommend it. I'm so glad I did it. I know it kind of hurt me when I made that when I spent that much money on equipment, but you'll have it for the rest of your life. It's really quality, and you won't have to buy any more hooks, and you can even use them. You can use them for regular crochet too, so they're great. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you liked this, please give it a like, subscribe, because I'm going to be having a lot more videos coming up. Also, please check out my Tunisian crochet course. I will put a couple of pictures of the items that you can make in that course. Just go on over and take a look at it. It's really, I have it priced really cheap. So yeah, take a look at that, and thank you again, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.